Well, that was as distasteful as I remember. In my video thanking everyone who has subscribed to my channel in recent months, I said I would make a video which would lead to a great sense of catharsis for the Star Wars fandom. This is that video. I am going to do a thorough analysis of this short scene in as much detail as I feel necessary in order to explain why this scene has branded itself on the minds of Star Wars fans. In short, I'm going to detail where Rian touched you on the metaphorical doll. I believe this scene is a crime against fiction, and is the principal moment when one of cinema's favourite characters was murdered. We know who the criminal is, but the cause of death is confusing, and needs an expert eye to determine. What is apparent is that the death was a messy one. This footage from the scene is not the best, but I believe it is of a satisfactory quality for the purposes of this investigation. First, we shall look at the events leading up to the crime. Second, the moment when the act was committed. Third, the cause of death. And fourth, the culprits and their motives. This report by the Ernst explains in detail the events leading up to the scene and tells us about the witnesses and potential accomplices in the crime. When you're the only human on an island in the middle of an ocean, you have to learn to take care of yourself. In The Last Jedi, we see Luke Skywalker do so by using the natural resources on Achar 2. He catches fish, he probably roasts porgs, I'm just being realistic, and he squeezes green milk from the Thala-siren. As an aside, I'm not sure why the creature is called a siren, or a Thala-siren, because this is what a siren looks like according to Greek mythology. The vivid scene isn't gross to anyone who's been on a dairy farm, but it caught Ray and some fans off guard. We asked Creature Shop head Neil Scanlan about bringing the creature to life, and he told us it's all practical, and involved a helicopter. At the very beginning of the film, Rian Johnson said to me that he wanted to take animatronics and practical effects and put them there on a real location. He didn't want to do certain things in the studio, Scanlan explained. We went to that location, we photographed that location, and we created a digital map of it, so that later back at Pinewood we could recreate the rocks. When we sculpted the Thala-siren, she's a full-sized animatronic puppet and she's about 18 feet tall, she was sculpted to fit into the rocks, so that she actually looked like she was sitting in that environment. They created the entire puppet at Pinewood from foam latex. The Thala-siren has a mechanism on the inside so her head could tilt forward, like a submarine hatch, Scanlan said, that allowed two puppets to get inside the creature, one on the front and one above him. One would operate the shoulders and flippers at the top, and the other would operate the belly, and the milking mechanism or the udder mechanism at the bottom, he said. Getting the large puppet to Ireland was no small task. They had to transport it to a location by helicopter. It's the only creature I've ever flown by helicopter, Scanlan laughed. Once there, they got the puppeteers inside, and staged two other, smaller Thala-sirens in the background. We had two puppeteers on the inside. One did the head from a rocky position at the top, he had the head on a rod, and there were two other puppeteers at the bottom that did the bottom flippers, Scanlan said. There were only 3 other people on the set. And then Mark Hamill and Daisy Ridley came and acted out the scene. And when Mark, as you know, wanted delivery of the milk from the udder, then the puppeteer on the inside duly obliged. Now that we have established the events prior to the murder, we can investigate how exactly this crime against fiction played out. Before we continue with the artistic analysis, I would like to share the thoughts of a zoologist concerning this creature. He told me that it was a more or less believable marine animal. However, 2 things confused him. The first was how the Thala-siren was able to make itself sit up like a human. The forelimbs are strong enough to pull it forwards, but he seemed concerned that the hind limbs were too small to push it up the rocks. Another point he made was that the flesh of the Thala-siren looked quite soft, and he was sure it would cut itself to pieces if it tried to climb said rocks. The second was that the Thala-siren wasn't streamlined. Unlike a sea lion, a dugong, or a plesiosaur, which he believes to be the 3 main influences behind the Thala-siren, it isn't streamlined, and thus would have more difficulty swimming under the water than other sea creatures. I would like to add with these thoughts with the observation that the Thala-siren has milk, yet it doesn't have a pup or a calf. So really, it shouldn't have any milk at all. Now, let's continue with the artistic investigation. The scene opens with this shot. Notice that the Thala-siren is not lying on its stomach or its side like most sea animals do when on the beach. It is sitting up as a human might, when observing the gentle push and pull of the tides in quiet contemplation. This immediately makes the creature appear to be more than just a dumb animal, and suggests a relatively high degree of intelligence. 2 shots later, we see this. Now I'm going to display some photos. This is a photo of a cow udder filled with milk. This is a photo of a sow's teats. And this is a photo of a bitch's teats. So, ladies and gentlemen, do these look like udders or teats? No, they look distinctly human. These look like a woman's breasts, or, more accurately, two women's breasts, as there are 4 of them. They are more bloated than those of a woman, perhaps, but they certainly bear a strong resemblance. Because they are not only similar in shape, but also alike right down to the milk outlets. Seriously, the Thala-siren not only has nipples, but a short ring around them, which are not too dissimilar from the areola of the human nipple. Factor in also that the breasts are naked, and there is a strong and disturbing semblance between them and that of the human female. Couple that with the fact the creature is sitting up like a human, and there is a very, very weird and uncomfortable vibe created by this alien. But like most films I make videos about, it gets worse. So begins the moment of the crime, the milking. As established before, these look womanly, and so it is unsettling to see a man start squeezing the nipples to squirt forth this milk. Humans have historically milked animals with either teats or udders, but never anything resembling the human female breast. Try picturing, for instance, a full-grown man entering an ape farm and milking the breasts of a female chimpanzee. It is difficult to imagine how a man could even contemplate doing such an act, because milking something very akin to the breasts that nurtured him as a baby would seem like an act of disrespect to his mother. Thus this scene strikes an odd, disgusting chord of disrespect towards human motherhood, and makes the audience uncomfortable. Now let us discuss the audio. Here are the noises the Thala-siren makes when we first see it. These are the noises it makes when it is being milked. Very different sounds. Now, couple these strange noises with the fact that the creature is sitting like a human, and the fact that it has breasts which resemble those of a woman, and we are left with I'm not even sure how to describe it. A man is touching the breasts of a strange female creature, which is making noises that sound like it is deriving pleasure from his touch. As the breasts resemble those of a woman, it does make one wonder whether this alien is getting a sexual pleasure out of the milking. If the alien had udders, this wouldn't have been such a problem, and could be explained away as the creature feeling grateful because its udders were bursting with milk, a problem which afflicts many domestic cows. However, because it has human-like breasts, another, less innocent conclusion can be drawn, and it taints the scene with perversion. Naturally, Ray doesn't know how to respond to any of this. Then finally, the crime is completed. The character is assassinated, and the cultural investigators are called to figure out what happened here. There is actually a lot contained in this single shot, so I'm going to take my time. First, let us examine this milk. Many have described it as blue, but it isn't really blue. It's more of a cyan green. This is important. The milk in A New Hope is clearly blue, a sky blue, and thus we associate it with the sky. Blue skies are associated with clear days, and often summer ones at that, and who doesn't like a summer's day? However, cyan green, unlike cyan blue, has very different appearances in the world, such as in mold and infections. This particular shade of cyan green is not a healthy one. Would you drink anything that was of this colour? I wouldn't. I'd think the liquid was gone off cow's milk. Because this colour is associated with bad things, one can only assume that the liquid is dangerous and not safe for consumption, which raises the question as to why Luke is drinking it. Now observe the way Luke Skywalker drinks the liquid. He shows no regard to manners and simple drinking etiquette. He does not seem to be concerned that he is letting the milk drip down his beard and onto his clothes. He doesn't even have a peasant's decorum to wipe his face with the back of his sleeve after swallowing. While we're this close, we might as well take a quick detour to examine his state of hygiene. Luke's hair is greasy, uncombed, and unkempt. His beard has clearly not been trimmed or cared for. It looks as if he doesn't bathe, or take particularly good care of himself. The clothes he is wearing are a muddy brown in colour, and presumably, this is so visitors to the island can't tell that he doesn't wash his clothes. His appearance and the way he drinks the Thala-siren milk show that he is an individual devoid of respect for both himself and others. A far cry from the Luke of the original trilogy who was self-assured and took good care of his appearance. So he drinks the Thala-siren milk, doesn't wipe the mixture of milk and saliva trickling down his lips, and then he does this. He gives a sort of wink towards the camera, and he pulls this weird grin, or grimace. I can't really tell what this expression is. However, I think Douglas Ernst gives the best explanation as to what the expression means.
Needs to go backwards in time and become a little baby on an island who only survives because he drinks from the breast milk from aliens, and he gets creepy little... yeah, this is bitter. It's a bitter little... oh yeah, he likes it, but it's bitter in Rian Johnson's world.
I'll put the link to his video in the description box, if any of you are interested in watching the rest. Now, I mentioned that Luke gave this sort of wink towards the camera. A wink which is directed not only to Rey, but to the audience. It is as if Luke Skywalker is well aware of how disgusting this act is, and he is winking and grinning/grimacing at us as if to say, I know you hate this, but you are going to have to suck it up and deal with it. In other words, he's doing this deliberately to spite members of the audience. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the crime scene which has become infamous. But what could have been the motive for such a terrible scene? Here I'm going to have to go into the realms of speculation, and use the powers of deduction to try and figure out what the motive could have been. I believe there were two main motives. Let's look at the first one, which is Rian Johnson's vision for the film, and for Luke Skywalker in particular. I think that Rian Johnson knew there would be fans like me who would not believe, even after watching Luke throw his lightsaber away, that this was Jake Skywalker, and that Luke Skywalker was dead, leaving Rian with a problem. The script demanded that Luke attempt to kill his nephew for having dark thoughts, and if he could not convince us that Luke had changed, there would be uproar in the cinemas. So the milk scene was added. I and many others still hoped, even after Luke threw away his lightsaber, that he wasn't truly gone, and he would, after some initial resistance, join Rey and help bring down the First Order in a heroic battle. Then I saw this scene, and I realised that the Luke I knew had been killed, and wasn't coming back. When Rian finally revealed that Luke attempted to kill Kylo Ren in his sleep for having insidious contemplations, I accepted it without critical thought, because I knew that this wasn't Luke. Anything resembling the real Luke was killed when he drank the milk of that Thala-siren. But this explanation for the milking scene raises another question. Why would someone want to destroy such a great character as Luke? And this is where I discuss the meta motive. I think we must look back at some information I shared in my previous video on Star Wars. Kathleen Kennedy has a political agenda for these films. However, I feel, to be fair, I must lay out what kind of feminism Kathleen Kennedy follows. It isn't this type of feminism, which is colloquially referred to as girl power feminism, but could more accurately be defined as liberal or second-wave feminism. And while I have some disagreements with this ideology's statements on society, I have never known it to create unbearable or terrible works of art. And the intentions of the ideology are at the very least noble, which means it is something I can respect even if I disagree. But this isn't the type of feminism Kennedy follows. Instead, she seems to be in with this variant. This is third-wave intersectional feminism. I sometimes like to call this the feminism of hatred, because as an ideology it is essentially built off that emotion, and its intentions are to destroy rather than build. In theory, the hatred is supposed to be directed to that abstract social-political force known as the patriarchy, but in reality normal people are the ones in the firing line. Do you happen to be a successful man who has made himself a place in society? Well, you are an oppressive patriarch, and you only succeeded because of societal discrimination against women and other minorities. And since you are overrepresented as a group in all the upper circles of society, we should probably put in diversity quotas and refuse to hire you on the basis of your sex and race. Are you a mother who has decided to become a housewife in order to look after your children better? Well, I hate to inform you, but you are a traitor to the sisterhood and are supporting patriarchal power structures. You should be ashamed of yourself. Now, when it comes to art, this type of feminist finds patriarchy everywhere. They find oppression everywhere, and they always find something which needs to be reconstructed or deconstructed. Luke Skywalker is a symbol of a more traditional masculinity. Star Wars was created at a time when masculinity was not shunned, despised, or disrespected. Boys were allowed to be boys and girls were allowed to be girls. Thus, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Lando Calrissian were unapologetically masculine, They were unafraid to try winning the attention and affection of a beautiful woman, and more than happy to do their part as leaders, saving the galaxy from the tyranny of the Galactic Empire. In our modern world, where masculinity is often pre-modified by the adjective toxic, and seen as a social construction by which the patriarchy operates, this representation of men has become problematic. Now, Kylo Ren says in The Last Jedi that you should forget the past and destroy it if you have to. And reportedly, Mark Hamill was told by Rian Johnson that they had to focus on what they wanted to do rather than what the fans wanted. So I do not think it is conspiratorial to conclude that the reason for the change in Luke's character was nothing more than the result of a motivation to destroy a treasured symbol of masculinity, further denigrating masculinity in the artistic sphere with the intention of raising this new progressive femininity onto a pedestal. In short, Luke was murdered by Rian Johnson, who was an accomplice of Kathleen Kennedy, who ordered him to do it, motivated by a feminist agenda. Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy are guilty of this crime against art, fiction, and the Star Wars universe. And with that, I announce this case to be closed. While I am making this video, there is just one last thing I should talk about. Porgs. They are the worst part of The Last Jedi. The Porg is the most hateful depiction of the puffin species I have ever seen. As puffins fall into the seabird category, I have a natural affinity with their species, and I feel that I must speak out against this speciest representation of them. Rian Johnson should hang his head in shame for propagating the most shameful and hurtful stereotypes of puffins. This visual slur is just as bad as the derogatory term of sea parrot, which was popular many years ago in uneducated and unmannerly circles. Lucasfilm should have been much more sensitive to the feelings of seabirds in The Last Jedi, and I hope I shall never see anything like it again in the world of cinema.